Where does that leave us? Let's ask KT McFarland. She's a former deputy national security advisor to President Trump and the author of Revolution, Trump, Washington, and We the People. KT, welcome back.
Oh, pleasure to be with you, although scary times.
Very scary times. So let's begin with the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, today announcing that Ukraine will join NATO. What does that mean?
Well, first of all, they can't. All right. If you look at the NATO charter and all the articles and what conditions countries have to meet to accede to NATO membership, Ukraine doesn't qualify because a country has to have secure borders. Ukraine is in the middle of a border war with Russia. They don't have a secure border. And even if the United States were somehow, they would waive all these foundational rules of NATO and say, oh, no, Ukraine, you come ahead and join, then we would have a direct NATO-Russia war. Look, I just spent a couple of days in Lithuania on the border and met with Ukrainian and Lithuanian senior officials. And they know that what's happening now is that Russia's preparing for a spring offensive, and Ukraine is going to have a hard time. Even if the United States continues the level of aid, or even if we go with more aid or more offensive weapons. And their get-out-of-jail-free card, the only thing that they seem to sort of latch on to is how does this end in Russia's complete humiliation and defeat, is, Russia, you know what, we're going to have NATO enlarged to include Ukraine, and therefore the American nuclear guarantee will be over everybody. And to me, it just is, that's being very unrealistic. All that does is serve to escalate the war. But on the other hand, you don't want Ukraine to fall. So I think somebody's got to find a third way here. It's not Russia wins or Ukraine wins. It's how do you get this fighting to stop, a negotiated solution, and then over time, as Ukraine develops an economy, then, the European Union, then other countries will be eager to have it join, as opposed to joining in the middle of a war.
I mean, it just seems so foolish because there's a non-zero chance under a scenario where they welcome Ukraine into NATO right now that we do enter a world war, isn't there?
If we welcome Ukraine into NATO right now, it is a world war, period, because then the NATO alliance is to defend NATO members against aggression. And that means we would be entering the war. We would be joining that war. Now, there's a better way to deal with this. And it's the President Trump had it right. The reason Ukraine was not invaded by Russia during the Trump presidency is Vladimir Putin. He wanted to, sure, but he couldn't afford it. And as long as President Biden keeps oil prices high, which he does because of his energy policy, then Russia has all the money in the world to keep fighting for a really long time. It is not a surprise that the Russian military army has completely reconstituted itself. As long as oil is hovering between $80, $90, $100, $120 a barrel, it has plenty of money to fight this war.
But in other words, this idea that, again, this is a Biden State Department official who says this, that it appears the Russian military is almost completely reconstituted. In other words, the American people have been lied to about the entire reason we've been involved in this. And we're giving all these resources. The idea that we're going to weaken the Russian military, that it's Ukrainian lives that are going to be lost, not American lives, that Ukraine is being supported by the United States to weaken Russia. And that literally hasn't happened. And we were lied to about this.
We were lied to, and it's another forever war. And this one is President Biden's personal making. Because of his energy policy, energy prices went up. Russia has windfall profits. When Trump was president, oil was at $40 a barrel. Russia was bankrupt. It couldn't have gone to war against anybody. And now that oil is double that, in some cases it's been triple that amount, Russia has a lot of money to pursue wars. And historically, every time Russia or the Soviet Union has been rich, it's with high oil prices, it's built up its military, it's invaded a neighbor, it's had proxy wars. They're behaving exactly as predicted. And Biden has enabled it all. So for them to now say, well, the solution to all of this is not to bankrupt Russia, which is my solution, and I think President Trump's solution. The solution is now we're going to expand this war and have it be a NATO-Russia war, I think is just courting disaster.
It's so crazy. All right, let me shift gears to Israel now with you, because we have breaking news today on that subject. Joe Biden had what the New York Times is reporting as a tense phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu today, and he demanded a, quote, immediate ceasefire during this phone call. He says it's needed to protect innocent civilians in Gaza He said that strikes on aid workers earlier this week are, quote, unacceptable. This was repeated at the White House press conference a short time ago. And this demand by Joe Biden towards Netanyahu follows reports from earlier this week that First Lady Jill Biden has demanded that Joe make this very call. What do you make of these developments?
It's all about politics. It's all about Joe Biden flagging poll numbers, and Joe Biden worried about not being reelected and worried about, say, 20,000 voters in Michigan, in Dearborn, Michigan, who are Muslim American voters who are very pro-Palestinian, they're anti-Israel, and they feel that the Democratic Party should abandon Israel. And unless the Democrats do abandon Israel, they're going to abandon Biden. So this is all politics. You know, it's again, it flies in the face of reality when Biden is calling, they think they're going to replace Bibi Netanyahu with a new president of Israel. And that's okay, you can do that, but guess what? Everybody in Israel is in favor of pursuing this war and destroying Hamas. And unless Israel does it, but Israel needs to do it, but do it very quickly because world public opinion is so turning against Israel. But again, Hamas knows and Iran knows they can't defeat Israel militarily or economically or technologically. They can only defeat Israel in the court of public opinion. That's why the head of Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, he said, look, human shields, they're not human shields, my people. They're human sacrifices. We are willing to sacrifice our own women and children to make Israel a pariah nation in the world.
And, you know, I'm looking at this call. He has this really tough phone call. It's instantly reported by all the major news outlets. He's a very tense call, and he's threatening Netanyahu. And he said future aid depends on Israel's behavior here, so he's ready to punish the Israelis if they don't act the way that he demands. I contrast that with Joe Biden's phone call with Xi Jinping earlier this week. He had another phone call earlier this week where he sucked up to Xi Jinping, and the White House went out of it to say that it was a chance for them to have a constructive conversation. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you have China, which is helping to kill over 100,000 Americans a year by way of the opioid crisis, and he's just having a constructive conversation with him, and here he is threatening Benjamin Netanyahu. What should I make of that contrast?
You should make of it is that our three main adversaries in the world, Russia, China, Iran, are looking at Joe Biden, and they're saying, we know how to push this guy around. We know how to push all of his buttons, and we are pushing hard. We're terrified that he's not going to be president, that we're going to have to face a tough Donald Trump. And so I think the United States is entering an era of several months, maybe even as much as a year, of maximum vulnerability, where all these leaders are looking to think, well, this is my narrow window of opportunity. If I'm going to take advantage of America, now is my moment. And the minute one does, the others jump in as well, figuring a weakened president, a weakened America is a golden opportunity. They won't be able to resist. It's
unbelievable. And then as far as China is concerned, you know, they listed a number of things that the two men talked about. They said they were talking about fighting narcotics production, conflict in the Middle East, North Korea's nuclear program, China's support of Russia. But not mentioned during all of this was the number of military-aged Chinese nationals who are now all coming into the United States. We've had tens of thousands of Chinese men who are pouring across our southern border into the United States. China knows it's happening. They're helping it happen, and they're refusing to take them back. In other words, they stay here in the United States of America. Why wouldn't a president of the United States bring up that issue?
For the same reason that this president, when he's talking to Bibi Netanyahu and when he's threatening Israel and when he's looking like he's going to make nice to the Palestinians, doesn't talk about American hostages. It's because they don't want to talk about unpleasant stuff for them. They're going to ignore it. They're going to look the other way. And again, these countries are looking at the United States and looking at Joe Biden saying, this is our moment, whether it's the Chinese president, the Russian president, or the Iranian ayatollahs. And that's why Biden just isn't going to man up and stand up to anybody. All he'd have to do is stand up to one of them, and the others would all fall into place. But no, he's going to capitulate and appease and cajole, thinking that's the greater way to peace.
How much changes should Donald Trump win this year? And I don't even mean become president yet. I'm looking back to 1980. I'm looking to Reagan getting elected, the release of the hostages in Iran, beating Jimmy Carter. What happens if Trump gets elected in November?
Well, he says he's going to do two things on day one. One, close the border. That's a done deal. The other is, then this is significant because of the knock-on effects, is he's going to drill, baby, drill. He's going to take the price of oil And because of American oil production, if we can produce fossil fuels again in an unfettered way, our energy industry dominates the world energy. We drive down the price. Russia's bankrupt. Iran is bankrupt. And at the same time, China, one of the most energy-needy countries in the world, looks at the United States, and we have an enormous amount of leverage if we control the world energy market. That's on day one. We can go on what happens on day 2, 3, or 4. But everything changes, especially with Donald Trump's energy policy.
Yes, and right in this very week, we're going to be talking about this more in the show coming up, but the Biden administration has tapped the brakes on refilling the Strategic Petroleum Reserve because you've got the sky-high price of oil, and they say, well, we can't pay that rate right now. It's only going to drive up gas prices in the United States during an election year. This wouldn't be a problem if they just announced today that they were going to unleash American energy. They could fill that thing up in a second, couldn't they, KT?
They could, and prices of oil would come down dramatically overnight. But the Biden administration really doesn't want lower oil prices. They have this fantasy that we're all going to have windmills and solar panels day after tomorrow, and the infrastructure is not there and won't be there for a decade. And so instead of using American energy, clean, cheap, abundant, secure American natural gas, which is in fact really good for the environment, they just have stuck to their druthers on this sort of religious mania on fossil fuels are bad for the world, even though fossil fuels are not bad for the world.
Yeah, they're critical. KT McFarland, thank you as always. Nice to talk to you again, and I look forward to doing that again soon.